All right. Good morning. How are you all doing? Having a great conference here? Yeah. I heard it was a great party last night. I mean, I saw it on Twitter because I only flew in and I was here at 1 in the morning, but seeing on the tweets it was a great party and yet you're all here, so I'm pretty much amazed. Great job. Um, my name is Mike Resseler. You can always reach me on Twitter, but be aware if you're having these autocorrect kind of things, it will automatically make this into Resseler and you won't reach me. But that being said, today I want to talk to you about Windows Nano Server, and the goal of this presentation is to start very lightly. What is Nano Server? Why should you be interested in it, and so on, and then go a little bit deeper on it, and so you can start. So I'm hoping by the end of this presentation that you have all the stuff and the gear you need to go home, to go to your demo environments, and to try and test it out. Note that I said demo environment or lab or something like. Don't deploy this in production yet. We've tried it, was a bad idea. If you are really getting interested after this session and you want to learn more, then I got good news for you, because in room 5, immediately after this session, 2 great speakers will even go more on this topic and more in depth, and will give you, I believe they had 8 demos of PowerShell. Might sound boring, but it's real great demos. And now I hope they actually will come through and make it a great session, but we'll see about that. So let's get started with our agenda. Very simple, small introduction. We're going to talk about packages. We're going to look at some advanced installation, give you some more information what you can do. But we're also going to talk about managing Nano Server, because this is one of the biggest fears of IT pros every time I talk about Nano Server. They say, yeah, it's all nice, but there's no remote desktop. How are we going to manage it? It's actually not that difficult, but it's a mindset that you need to change. And in all honesty, the first 2 days I was working with this, that was actually when it was TP2, which was way more difficult than it is today. I kind of had the urge to throw away my laptop from time to time, but once you get the hang of it, it's really not that difficult. Of course, there will be times, especially since we're still technical preview, that there are some issues. So how can you go troubleshooting? What are your possibilities? And there are quite a few there. There's some more information, and when time permits, let's do a Q&A. I will be running around here also today, and in the meantime we'll do some demos as well. At least I hope that the demo gods are with me. So let's start very easy. What is Nano Server? It's a headless 64-bit server. So forget about 32-bit. I actually hope you already forgot about that a couple of years ago, but if you're still doing it, now it's really the time to forget about it. And it's literally headless. I will show you that if you connect to a Nano Server, that you kind of have the old DOS type thing, which looks terrible, and if you want to go somewhere you actually have to use tab and keys, and there's no mouse, and it's headless, there's no GUI. When you deploy this, you will see you just got an operating system which basically doesn't do anything. Literally nothing. So it comes with packages that you need to apply. It also means that if you deploy something, you literally have nothing, which means you're not consuming any resources. So all of the overhead is basically gone. Microsoft has built this with the idea of, and this is probably one of the marketing buzzwords you're going to hear today, cloud fabrics. Why did they build this? Because they realized their own Windows Server, when they were running it in Azure, and it was a HyperV host, it was huge. And they want to have something really, really small that only did what it had to do as a host. Being a HyperV host, maybe clustering, networking, storage, stop. Nothing more than that. But they kind of saw pretty quickly that they could be interesting for other things as well. And you're going to see that with each technical preview, we are getting more packages. We're getting more roles. And it's also the idea that you can use it for your own, what they call born in the cloud applications, which means in an application you can deploy on Nano Server, and that's kind of when Nano Server goes down, you literally spin up the second one and it should be running again. In all honesty, this is great for the future, but how many solutions today out there can actually support this type of applications? Not much. Now you can start pushing your developers if you've got developers in the house and say, hey, this is the way to go. But do keep in mind that the way you're going to create packages and applications has changed. No more MSI. So install, next, 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 gone. Now you're going to have to use the AppX package format. This is completely new, and you're going to have to use ASP.NET, the latest version, the core one. So they're probably going to have to change something in their code. But if you do this today already, and you tell this to your developers, and they would actually listen. I mean, I'm an IT pro, I know developers never listen to me. But imagine that they listen. They have to change the way they develop, and the only way to test it today is on Nano server. Now, will that AppX package be running later on into Microsoft Azure, into the full-blown Windows server? Yes. By the time we're GA, maybe with a bit of luck, it will be in the next technical preview. But as of today, the only way to test is going to be this Nano server. So keep that in mind. So why did they start with this? Rebooting impacts the business. Just think about Azure for a second. And you know, Microsoft is all about Azure, Azure, Azure. And I think I said it enough by now. They have to run this. They have to make it as cheap as possible. They're fighting a war against Amazon. They're not doing that bad, but still it's a war. So they need to cut costs. So how can you cut costs? That's making sure that your servers are using less resources, which means you can deploy more servers for each host. But also Microsoft works a lot with images. And every time they have a new host, they basically deploy an image, and 15 minutes later, make it half an hour, the thing is ready and ready to serve. Now if you can make that smaller, as in 500 megabyte image, it will impact less the network, it will be faster deployed, and so on. But they also realize that these requirements are not only for Azure, these requirements can be in the Office as well. Because what is the big issue that IT pros have today? When a developer comes to you, yeah, I kind of like to make jokes about developers, so if there are developers in the house, I'm really, really sorry. You can give me a red card afterwards, it's okay. If they come to me and they say, I need a new server, they know it's going to take, if I am in a good mood, 1 day before they have their server. While when they take the credit card and they go to their Azure subscription, they have that server in 15 minutes. We need to be able to do that as well. Microsoft realizes that as well. I know they're shouting Azure, 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 but they're not forgetting about on-premises infrastructure because they believe that hybrid is the future. So they want to deliver this as well. And then finally, I think very important is security as well. Nobody likes to do patch Tuesday, it's reboots, it's work, and it's always security, security. If we can lower that impact, that's a good thing for everybody. So let's quickly look how it is today. This was Windows NT, you know, and up until Server 2003. We deployed a huge, big server with a lot of GUIs, and if we wanted something, we added some roles and features, and we were up and running, right? Then came 2008, and 2008 R2, and you know they invented something which was called Server Core, and I immediately liked it, but the problem was it was never really deployed in environments. Why was it? Well, you start deployment and you had the choice: yes, core, or no core, and there was no switching, which means everything had to be done typing. Half of the GUIs to connect remotely were not good, let's put it like that. So it wasn't easy to work with, and people still continue to work with the full server. Now guess what? Microsoft actually learns. So what they did in 2012 and 2012 R2 was they said, you know what, we're gonna build Server Core, and if you want to have more GUI, then you have the minimal server interface, and you want to get the full-blown tools and everything, you're going to go for the shell. And actually there's a fourth one as well. If you want to go even further for VDI, you can deploy desktop on top of that. But again, the same principle. We've got, call it the base server installation, and then you deploy roles and images. So now we're going to go to 2016. Nano server. And this is where we're going to. Nano server, really, really small headless. Deploy those packages. Server core. Again, same principle, deploy the package. The only mistake I think they made here, maybe they changed that, is we're back at the part where you're going to decide in the beginning what you need. Ideally, that would have been the case, but you know, it is what it is today. So as I already said, completely refactored. Think about those applications. Think about virtual machines as a Hyper-V host, works very well. You already heard it, probably saw a session already on it as well. Containers, there's a lot of buzz around it. Will it be everywhere next year? I don't think so. Will it be something for the next couple of years? Probably we're going to see that more and more and often. And this is a great platform to actually deploy it on. Okay, said roles and features live outside of that server, and we're going to see that as well, which means if you deploy it, there's no binaries, there's no metadata, everything really stays small. That also means that if you want to deploy a package afterwards, it's not like we know it today, like you go to roles and features, you say go, it installs, it reboots, you're done. No, you're going to have to point to the packages that live outside of that server. So that might be a little bit confusing. It's got full driver support. There's no issues whether you run a nice Dell, IBM, Fujitsu, HP, name your favorite brand server. As long as they deliver the drivers like they do for the full server experience, you will be able to use them for that Nano server as well. And it comes also with anti-malware. You can put Windows Defender in there as a package. Note that it said can, and this is also new. We're not forced anymore to have Windows Defender. It's going to be your choice, which I personally think is a good decision because not everybody wants to use Windows Defender. Some want to use some other third-party vendors, some basically don't want to use any anti-malware, which is of course something you have to choose for yourself. These are not my figures, let me get that straight. I don't have the manpower or the time to actually collect these items. These come from Microsoft and they're from 2014. So you can start imagining already how long they're working on this solution. And this is the difference between patches in Nano server, the blue one, server core, the red one, and the full server in green. How many important bulletins, criticals, and how many reboots you need in 1 year. Now, as you can see on the right, 3 reboots for Nano server versus 11 for the full server. Now this becomes really interesting. How is this possible? How did they do that? Is the code that different? Not really. It's just because most reboots and most critical bulletins and so on come from the GUI elements, which aren't there anymore. Few other numbers. I'm going to go over it quickly because they're not that important. I'm sure that you can download the slides afterwards. Is what type of drivers are loaded? How many services do we see running? Don't forget, this is without anything running. This is just the server. And how many ports are open in the firewall? And these are kind of big differences. Resource utilization, how many processes, how many boot I/O do we have, and how many kernel memory have we in use. Now, of course, if we have a server of 256 gigabyte of RAM as a Hyper-V host, and you're winning, what is it here, 50, 70 megabyte of RAM, it doesn't seem a lot. But in the long term, when you have a huge environment, these kind of savings can actually make a lot of money for your company. And then finally, the deployment improvements, how fast setup time between 40 seconds and 300 seconds. By the way, they did monitor this, of course, on real hardware. My environment is running on this. I don't make those 40 seconds. I wished, but I don't make it. But also look at the disk footprint, 0.4, 0.5 gigabyte versus almost 5 and so on. All right. I got your interest now, at least I hope. So let's see how we can start with it. Now, one of the first things you need to know, there's no setup. There's no next, go take a coffee, come back, have 3 reboots, finished. It's not. You're going to have to use PowerShell to create an image and then go from there. In TP2, to create a Nano server, that was terrible. TP3, they had some PowerShell scripts, which made it a little bit more easier, but still not that easy. You had to .source scripts. It took some time to get with it. Now in TP4, it's way more easier. You just got a module which you're going to import, and I'll show you that in a couple of seconds. And after that, you got 2 scripts that you can use. You add some parameters, and you're off to go. And inside that module, you've got 3 commandlets, as I said. Edit Nano server image, get Nano server package, and new Nano server image. And that's all you need to do everything what you want. So let's quickly look at some examples. I know PowerShell in a slide looks terrible, but just look at it. You're going to say new Nano server image, and then you're going to point it to a media path. Media path is basically your ISO. I mounted it on the D drive, your own choice how you do it. And then you're going to create a base image, which you're going to store at the base path, which could be somewhere a folder on your drive, whatever it is. And from that base, you're going to go to the target path. And the target path is where your VHD or VHDX is going to be, which you can use then to make it a physical server, make it a virtual server, whatever you want. In my case, I'm going to deploy a lot or work with virtual servers, but you can do the same for the physical server. And then I basically chose to add the guest drivers, dash guest drivers. What does it mean? It just means add HyperV drivers to make it a virtual. If you want to do it on the physical, then you can just look at the last PowerShell where I have dash OEM drivers. And that will put the physical drivers in. Which are the OEM drivers? The same one that are automatically embedded in Windows Server 2016. Exactly the same, right? Now if you look again at that first script, what I'm doing here is literally deploying a server with nothing on it. No packages, it does nothing. It's got no roles, so it's just sitting there doing nothing. But that's how you're going to work. One note of importance, and a mistake I see a lot, is from the moment you created that base path image the first time, the next time you're going to deploy a Nano server, you actually don't need to use the media path anymore. As long as the ISO hasn't changed, Microsoft doesn't release a new ISO, you can now only use the base path because that's the clean version and start from there. That saves you another 20-25 seconds in the deployment. You already see on the last PowerShell script that there's dash compute, dash clustering. This is the way we're adding packages. In this case, with the last one, I'm building a physical server. I give it a computer name. I put the OEM drivers in it. I say dash compute to make it a hypervisor and dash clustering to make sure that that failover cluster role is in there so I can use that to build my failover cluster, my HyperV failover cluster. Pretty simple. I'm not going to show you this live. I am going to show a few things live, but not this one because it just, I said 40 seconds, in my case a little bit longer. So I've got something very badly created. I'm very bad at videos, and sped it up a bit. So this is what happens, right? You're going to import. I made verbose just to show you that there are three small things coming in. And then we have the new Nano server image and all of the different things. Very simple. Give it a computer name. The only thing you will see when you run it is going to ask you for an administrator password. And it starts to create an image. It's processing. You can see I speed it up. It's adding the packages that I want there. Very important, you can actually see now done, but in reality it can take a little bit longer, and then we just deploy it as a HyperV image. Not that difficult, right? Very simple, very easy to do. That's all you need to do. Give it a name. You can see I'm very slow in typing, and that's it. What do you think? Simple? Difficult? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? And you should be running in your environment. The nice thing about this, if you don't really want to use it but just play with it, 256 megabytes. This has got 8 gig and it looks like I'm running 7 servers on it. But it works. It really doesn't need that amount of memory. So now I'm just pointing it to my VHD and that's it. Can you do everything with PowerShell? Of course. That's how you like it. Sometimes I like to use a wizard, sometimes I use PowerShell, and that's it. And here we go. It's running. There's nothing more to it. You start it, and you will see the boot process. I did speed this up as well a little bit. The first time it can take a little bit of time. Afterwards you will see a lot of improvements. And after it has been booted, you will literally see a black screen. This is it. So now what I need to do is add my username, add my domain, which by the way, this one isn't domain joined yet because we literally build it without any parameters. We'll come back to that as well. And log in and you're done. Pretty simple. All right. Let me quickly go back here and so I can go to talk about packages. Looks ugly. Yes, it is. This is what we have today. We've got HyperV, we've got failover clustering, we've got those guest drivers, basic drivers, file server role. You can install softs if you want to. Defender, reverse forwarders. What it means is if you deploy the package, you can actually ask your developers, look, I've did this. Whatever code you have, let's try if it works with the reverse forward. So it's going to give you some backwards compatibility. It probably won't work with every application, but there are possibilities that it does work. We've got DNS, which I think is very interesting, which means no more full-blown server for some DNS services, just a Nano server, small resources, and leave it running and doing its thing. Desired state configuration is there already, IaaS, support for Windows containers. If you want to manage it with SCVMM, no problem, that is possible. You can already deploy agents from Operations Manager as well. We've got MPDS, data center bridging, all of those that exist. Now let's talk a little bit about the PowerShell command loads, how you can add those packages and how you can actually start tweaking your images. So if you're going to look at that PowerShell script, if you're going to look at those different command loads, you're going to see there are quite a few parameters. And when I say quite a few, I mean quite a few. Yeah. Because one of the first things they realized at Microsoft is, great, we built one, then people kind of have to connect to it remotely, but how are they going to add an IP address to it? Now if you got DHCP in your server LAN, that's possible, but who's got DHCP in the server LAN? Not that many people. So we need to change this. That was one. Now there were tricks. You could use setup complete CMD, you could the first run, you could add an XML file inside, you know, to get the IP. But that was a lot of work, so now they all made sure their parameters, and again we're expecting more in the next versions. You can change the language if you want to. If you don't want to use English, you can make it in another language. If you're going to use a VHD or a VHDX, by default it will be dynamic disk of 40 gig. Maybe you're like, that's not enough, or whoa, way too much. You can change that size as well. All of the different roles. And then you can see you can actually put administrator passwords in it as well, because you saw in the video that I had to type the administrator password, but you can just pass it through as well. Please note, as of today, when you do that and somebody can see the script, they can see that password. So it's not always that interesting. But as you can see already here as well, we got possibilities to add it to domain. And there are many ways of adding it to domain. I'll come back to that one. Changing the IP, I already said, but then also making sure that emergency management consoles are connected, that you can actually connect remotely in case something goes wrong and you lost complete access to it. Merge path, the one below, is a very interesting one, because that you can specify a folder which sits on your local machine, and when you create your image, everything within that folder will be automatically copied to the root of that server, and when it starts, that data will be available in your server. So if you need to add scripts in there or config files or whatever you need, you can copy it like that. Alright, some examples. It's huge. Let me just skip this one and show you live. That might be better, because again it doesn't look that good on a PowerPoint slide. Some additional information I want to talk about also is that domain join, right? If your machine is in the same domain, and you've got the rights to join a server, as of course, then you only need to use that one parameter, and it will be done for you. If it's not, you can use other parameters to still join a domain. However, at that point in time, you need to harvest a blob. Does everybody more or less know how to harvest an Active Directory blob? If you don't, talk to your AD administrators. Still simple, but you need to have done it once. I'll show you maybe some code as well. You can reuse a domain account as well. You know, you threw away your server, you want to reuse the name, that's perfectly possible. And if you by accident forgot to join it to domain and the server is already running, you can do it online as well. But I would suggest you try to avoid that, because that's a little bit more work. Okay. Another thing you can do is deploy your Nano servers, you know, to play with, to learn in Azure. Imagine you don't have hardware, or your boss doesn't want to give you a playground. You can actually deploy it in Azure as well. Now you got three possibilities. It is available in the gallery, so just go to your Azure subscription, click next, and you start running. But you can build it on this machine as well. Use the -Azure parameter, and automatically it will make sure it's ready. Upload it to your storage account, and then you're good to go as well. So that is a possibility. Why would you want to do it? Well, think about the fact that Microsoft has said something about running a hypervisor in a hypervisor, nested virtualization, and they're going to bring that to Azure as well, which means you're going to have the possibility to deploy HyperV hosts into Azure. Yes, you're nesting. Yes, there will be some performance loss, but purely from the view of trying out stuff, building out deployments, that might be very interesting. And if Microsoft comes through and they succeed in what they are hoping, then the performance loss will be less than 15%, which means extending your data center to Azure suddenly becomes something interesting, because all the tools and the solutions and whatever you're using today in your own environment suddenly becomes available on Azure as well. So that is actually very promising, I think. All right. Let's jump back to this, not to the video, but to PowerShell again. Good. So, let's see, that makes it easier. All right. Get packages is literally figuring out with my base image or with one of my servers, what type of packages are there, what type of packages can I deploy. It's not that much, but at least you know what's happening, right? So we're running my script, and that takes too long, so I'm gonna have to pray more to the demo gods, I'm afraid. Something is going wrong here. Oh, I actually got the wrong one. Sorry about that. Run like this for a second. Get Nano server packages, sorry, will look into my base path under this folder and then show me what the packages are. But I did something wrong, and I'm not sure what's happening now. So I'll just continue explaining a few things, and then hopefully I can go back to my live thing. Another thing that you need to know is that language. One of the first mistakes I made is not this computer, but another one, which is deployed in Dutch. You don't want to have a Dutch computer because of the bad keyboard, but it's Dutch. I didn't realize that when I built my image and I don't put the -language, as you can see here, it will just take the language of the computer you're deploying. So if you got Norwegian computer and you're deploying the server, your server will be Norwegian, if that language package, of course, already exists. So if you don't want that, make sure you do -language, sorry, and put the right one there, so it's in the right language. In the meantime, server got through. Let me just show you a few things. Ouch. That hurts. Maybe I need to import here first. Let me try again. Let's try one more time. I'm not doing well today. I'm sorry about that. Let's try to fix that as soon as possible. Some examples about that advanced deployment, right? If you've got new Nano server image, always the same. See that I'm not using the media path anymore. I've got my target path, which is just a VHDX that I want. If you want a generation 2, you need to choose VHDX. If you want a generation 1, you can still use VHD if you want to. We've got our base path, where my is, and I just said add some clustering. Nothing important. But I can also do editing. Editing meaning I've created it, but I made a mistake. I want to change some things. Again, where's my base path? Where's the target path? I've got a VHD here. What is my interface name index? Because what I wanted to do here was simply change my IP afterwards. There's one issue here. If you do this, you need to know what the name of the interface is. Now, this is pretty easy if you deploy it as a VM, because that will be Ethernet. If it's on a physical server, that can be something different, so you need to know that up front. The second problem is if you do it the way I show you here, it will just add that IP address, which means you suddenly have 2 IP addresses if it would have already had one before. it doesn't remove the old one. So keep that in mind when you're playing with editing. Okay. Another thing I'm going to show you is a domain join. Very simple. Again, target path, base path, adding clustering and compute. As you can see here, just make sure I'll show you. Giving it a computer name and then joining the domain. That's it. That's all you need to do. As long as your user has the rights to join it in a domain, you're good to go. I enabled the remote management port, which means if I really am into a big problem, I can remotely connect something to it and try to figure out what's wrong. I added the guest drivers. I changed the IP address, and since it's a new, it will actually get that IP address. I give it a gateway, a subnet mask. I set max size. This is going to be the maximum size of my VHDX, or VHD in this case, I'm not sure anymore. No, VHDX, okay. This is, as you can see, in bytes and not in megabyte or gigabyte, so take your calculator a few times 1024, and then I add some scripts to it as well. Still pretty simple. If you want to join it in another domain, then you need to do this djoin first. What it's going to do, it's going to grab an object, a blob, from that other domain, download it, simple file. That file contains a lot of numbers, letters, some kind of stuff, but you need that to be able to join it when you're on another domain, right? And then the only thing you need to do when you create a new Nano server is actually say, okay, I'm going to point to the domain blob path, which is somewhere a path on a server, local, whatever you do, and it will know that. Will it be joined to the domain at that point in time? No. It will be joined to the domain the moment you start your first boot. So if you do it like this and you see why is that Nano server so slow in booting the first time, you're joining it to a domain. So it takes some time before everything, they talk to each other and so on. Last but not least, and I've made that mistake unfortunately a couple of times, if you're joining a domain, make sure it's got the IP, the subnet mask and so on, so it can actually talk to that domain controller. First time I did it, I was just starting it, it had no access to that specific server VLAN. Guess what, I never joined the domain. And I was figuring out what is wrong, well, it couldn't talk to it. Especially DNS and things like that can be important. Reuse domain node is the only parameter you need if you simply want to reuse a computer account that already exists. I know there are some environments where they say don't use a blob, we'll create a computer account in AD, here's the data. Now reuse it, that you can do as well. And then for the online domain join, that's a little bit more difficult, as you can see right here. So just grow this a bit. You need to have a blob. And then you're going to start using a netuse to connect to that server. You're going to copy that blob somewhere. I'm using temp, but choose whatever folder you want. And then you're going to use PowerShell, and I'll come back to that in the management, to actually connect to it. And from the moment I do that, then I need to run a djoin again. Write this code. By the way, if you want to know what it means, I don't know, but it's always the same. It's what the ID guys told me I use, so pretty simple. And then I need to reboot, of course. Online doesn't mean it can keep running. You still need to reboot to get it there. And then you just exit your PowerShell session. Using an unattended is possible as well. Who likes to use unattended? I hope Johan Arvidmark is not here, because I know he will be liking this, but where is it? Unattended. Here we go. Nope, this one. It's this. We all love this one when we're deploying an image, but many organizations ask me, that's all great, but with using unattended, with using setup complete for years already, I don't want to change that. Can I use it? The answer is yes. You just have to make sure that that unattended file is in the right directory when you start your virtual machine the first time, or your physical server. It's not rocket science for them. I prefer not to use it, but that's of course a choice. So what you see here is you can add a computer name, some user accounts, what's your password, register owner, and what I actually wanted to show you as well is how you can add it to a domain. This is the contents of such a blob. So if you receive a blob, you just open it in Notepad and you copy it right here, and then it will join as well. Still not that difficult, I think. Good. Let me just see. Yeah. And go back right here. So management. It's not PowerShell alone. Now I do advise you the moment you start working with it to use as much as possible PowerShell, because it's fast, you can do everything with it. But you can still use your day-to-day solutions. One of the new things is a Nano server recovery console. Again, it's like a command prompt. It's like something which we used during, even before NT. Or if you're a Linux administrator, you will know that as well. Wow. I have no idea what was happening there. What it gives you is the possibility to change some IP settings and to change some firewall rules. Everything? No. But just enough to make sure you got back connectivity to that server. For example, if you need to deploy a specific firewall rule, you won't be able to do that through the Nano server recovery console. You will see a list of predefined rules, and you can enable or disable them. Just to give you that connection so you can do your management afterwards. Same for an IP address. What you can do is very simple. Put an IP address in it, a subnet mask, a DNS server, and that's it. Just to have that connectivity, then you can remotely connect to it and do whatever you need to do. And then there's PowerShell Remoting. You're going to use a lot of PowerShell Remoting, but if you deploy it as a virtual machine, you can also use PowerShell Direct, and I'll show you that as well. If we got fans of SIM over WinRM, works as well. I'll show you that in a second. Remote management works, and then everything you know today will continue to work as well. You like Server Manager, but it will work. And trust me, they are making a lot of changes into Server Manager to make it a little bit better than it is today. If you want to use HyperV Manager, you can connect. If you got a failover cluster, you want Cluster Manager, it connects. As of today, not everything works. For example, one of the roles is IIS. You won't be able to use a GUI remotely. So if you got your web administrators telling you, hey, I want IIS, that's great, then you're going to say, yeah, but app CMD, web CMD, those kind of things, that's how you're going to have to work. DNS works perfectly, but you have to set it up, of course, as well first. Now, the Nano Server Recovery Console in TP3, if you've been playing with that, it was called the Emergency Management Console. The developers had to change that name. Any idea why they had to change that name? Just look at the Emergency Management Console, make it an acronym, and you'll realize it's a certain company, which is now called Dell, so they still would be able to use it. And then it gives you that, as I said, IP4, IPv6 root. You can actually put routing rules in there as well, and fire rules, and shut down or restart the server. How do I figure out what IP I have? The easiest is that recovery console. You can use EMS. You can actually ping it if your DNS server works. And then PowerShell Direct if your server is a virtual machine. Anybody who knows how to use PowerShell Remoting? Not going to spend too much time here. I'll just show you. That's easier. But again, PowerShell Direct, if you never used that, it's something new for 2016. It's very handy, very easy. PowerShell Sim, some examples. Not going to stay too much time because I can show you. That's way more fun. Remote management, WinRS if you want to. You can use it. Don't use it that much, but it is possible. Why don't I like to use it? Because of that -p. You actually type in your password, so if somebody's looking over your shoulder, not always a good idea. The remote consoles, most of them work. What do I mean by push your third-party vendor? If you have a third-party vendor that really likes Nano as well and want to deploy on a thing, you should congratulate him, but make sure that his remote consoles work as well. That you don't have to do anything through scripting or config files or something like that. And then there's something new, which unfortunately I can't show you yet, because it was a private beta, and I don't think they actually opened it up already for the public, although it's here soon. And that's something which is called Remote Server Management Tools that will run in Azure. And what it does, it's going to give you a web-based console, and it's going to replace quite a few of the tools you normally use. It's going to give you a task manager, registry editor, event viewer. Well, you know, you can read all of these tools in Azure. That means if it's Friday evening, one of your servers got an issue and you're already at the bar. I'm from Belgium. That's what we do on a Friday evening. You don't have to have your work computer with you. The only thing you need to have is a connection to the internet, connect to those tools, and then remotely start troubleshooting or configuring your servers. As of today, this will probably only work for Nano server, but the end idea of these tools is it works on every Windows server, at least starting from 2016. This probably will be opened as a beta in Azure rather soon, and it looks very promising, although you will need to have a gateway on premises to be able to connect to that service. So keep that in mind. Good. Let's go back to some demos because that's way more fun, and let's go to the management. So let's start with some PowerShell remoting. Now just to show you, and I hope my demos start to work now. IPconfig. So what I want to show you here is very simple. My IP address is .240. That's the one of my local machine, right? What I'm going to do now is do remote PowerShell. It's just enter PS session, the computer name, and I already passed the credential. But no password, which means it's going to ask me for a password. But since you saw my script a couple of minutes ago, you know what my password is. Ooh. Ouch, this really starts to hurt. What the hell? Might look better. Now, one of the things you're seeing when you do this, it might seem slow. The reason why that is I'm doing this through ISZ, and I really like ISZ. It's great to work with. One of the things it needs to load is when it connects, and you can see it now, please wait in the comments, it's actually running through the models to see what's in there to give me that help file. So what you're going to see in the comments, the moment it's got loaded, is actually every commandlet you can run on Nano server and not the ones anymore that I can run on my workstation. So it's an advantage on the one hand, a disadvantage because it takes the connection a little bit longer. But, you know. Now if I run IPconfig again, just do this. What I should see now, if all goes well, is another IP address. How can you see also that you're actually not on your local server anymore? That's by this. Right here. Great, that doesn't work either. Right here below you can see TP4 Nano 03, which means you're working remotely on another server. How do you exit this? Pretty simple. Just type in exit and you're gone. Nothing more to it, very simple. Now just to show you that I'm back on my own computer, I'll do IPconfig again. I know it's a simple demo, but we've got 240 again, and I'm going to use a PowerShell direct session now. That means I can connect to that virtual machine without having network. The only thing I need to have is a virtual machine that runs at least Windows 10 or one of the TPs of Windows Server, and the host machine where you're running out has to be Windows 10 or a Server 2016 as well. You need to run PowerShell also as an administrator. Took me a while to figure that one out. But the only thing then you need to do is enter PS session, the name of the virtual machine as it is known in your HyperV manager. Now why do I want to show you that? Because you can see that the name of my virtual machine is TP4-Nano-03. But the real name of the server is without the first dash. We're going to run this one. Again, it's going to ask you for credentials. Hope I typed the right password. And you're going to see exactly the same thing. It's going to connect. It's going to scan the modules. And it will come back. Okay. And after it's done, we will be able to do to show you IPconfig again to see. Here we go. We've got loading. It takes a bit longer, and I should be back on my Nano server as well. Again, pretty simple, not much to it. We're going to exit again. Now quickly let's look at PowerShell and sim. How are you going to do it? What I do is I create a variable $sim. Not really inventive, but follow me here. You create a new sim session. You're going to give it a credential and you're going to connect to a computer name. That's it. Nothing more to it. Very simple. We run it and we've got a sim session, right? And then next thing what you can do is get sim instance, the name of the sim instance, and then run whatever you want to do. In this case, I'm looking for the class name computer system and giving me the list. So let me just show you that. And then you get a lot of information about that server. And you can see that right here. What is the name? What is the class? It's an x64 based PC. What is my OEM string array, which, by the way, to be filed by MSFT, so you can actually see it is a beta. It's a virtual machine and so some data, nothing fancy, but you can run processes, queries as well. For example, now with this one, I actually look what type of processes are running on that server, and you can see it's way less than you normally would have on a true server. Some more. Quickly gonna change my code page here, and then I can actually run WinRS, and you can see I can run an IPconfig remotely, or I can use whatever other commands I need to do. And some of the applications workloads like IIS, your developers probably going to do it like this and push their commands to change IIS through this. But I said also that you can use your normal console. So let's go to Server Manager. I've got my servers right here. TP4, Nano 0, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which is my cluster. Do note that you see data retrieval errors. That doesn't mean I did something wrong or you did something wrong when you use it. The thing is, when you're deploying it as of today, not everything is implemented yet. One of the things that isn't complete is some of the events that you would like to see in Events Viewer. They're not there. They didn't build that XML file yet for Nano. Another thing that doesn't work for now is the best practice analyzer. It will just give you an error saying, I tried to do BPA, but there's no information. Why is that? They just didn't do it yet. I hope they will do it by GA, but as of today, it isn't. And then you can just continue like you normally would work. You want to see the failover cluster manager or HyperV manager or something like that, and I already opened them in the interest of time. This is my failover cluster manager. You see 3 nodes, but I can simply say, just the way I used to work with server, add a node, next. Let's be extremely lazy here and do it like this. Add my node 6. He's verifying. Really looking into issues here. It works. Gonna go next. Do not run the validation wizard if you're using Nano today. It doesn't work. It's not even supported. It might even do something extremely bad. Yes, they will fix that by TP5 or GA, but as of today, no. I do not require support. Don't run it. You do next. Add the storage to the cluster. That's all good. I'm certainly not a cluster manager administrator, but at least now everything is added. And it's very simple. And I'll leave it that for here for a second, and at the same time show you something else, which was here. HyperV Manager works as well. What I did is I literally connected to one of my Nano HyperV servers. It's nested, so I won't be able to start it, but you can deploy here and see all of those things as well. So pretty easy to do. You can still use your day-to-day consoles, right? And last but not least, where did I open it? Here we go. No. Shit, looks like I didn't open it yet. So let me go back right here, go to my tools, because when you look at it and you right click on one of these Nano servers and you want to say computer manager, it's grayed out. It doesn't work because they say it doesn't work yet. Actually, it does work. Just go to tools, computer management. Here we go. And say connect to another computer. Again, I'm going to be the lazy guy here. Check my names. Take my Nano tree. Okay. Not everything will be visible, but there will be no issues in going to your services or going to your event viewer. But again, with the note that not everything is implemented yet. So if you want to see the events from a virtualization, when it's a Hyper-V host, you won't see them because they didn't implement that XML yet. But, you know, it's there for the future and will work. Now let's quickly see that was a success. And now, as I said, in the failover cluster manager, you can easily see that it's added there as well. All right. Where is this? Here we go. Some more. Let's look a bit about the troubleshooting techniques, because things will go wrong. Actually, the most troubleshooting techniques you know today are already implemented. So you have a possibility to use setup and boot event log. Now this is something new in 2016, which will work for every server, but for Nano as well. What you're going to do is you're going to deploy an ETW collector somewhere in your environment, and he will be responsible for collecting messages from all of your servers during the setup and the boot. They are ETL files. We all love those. Very difficult to read, but those of you who like it and can troubleshoot it and have the viewers for it, you can use those when you're booting and when you're setting the setup in case something goes wrong. So that is very nice that we used by Nano as well. It's new, I said it. It's also push. That server component, that new role that you can deploy on a full server, unfortunately only for the moment, will not ask to the servers, give me messages. It's going to be the servers themselves that are going to push them to that server, right? There's a way to do kernel debugging. There are 4 methods. You can use serial port. Are there still people doing that, actually? But you have the possibility. You can do it over TCP IP, with the risk, of course, if you don't have an IP, there won't be any debugging. You can use over FireWire or USB. What I see now in the field is most people who are using this will do it over USB, because most servers somewhere have a USB port. So that works as well. Now if you're planning to ever use it, make sure you activate it when you deploy your image, because it won't be there automatically. And I know that in the beginning I didn't do it, and then you got an issue and you say, hey, I want to do kernel debugging. But I never enabled it. And then you need to edit it, the image, and change it, and well, you can imagine how much pain that was. How do you do it? Just again, adding a parameter to that, to those scripts. And in this case, you see the examples of serial, net, FireWire, which is 1394, or USB. Okay, very simple, not that difficult. Just do it up front, so it's ready when you need it. Emergency management service does work as well. Normally this is actually enabled on every server by default, not in Nano server. So this is again something you need to say, enable EMS, which port you're going to use and what the baud rate will be. Okay. A bit more, and I'll show you that as well. Those of you who still like Dizzam, it's not a problem, you can use it. They made the script so you don't need it anymore. But we know a lot of people that love Dizzam, that love Unattended XML, so you can still use it. And sometimes, such as DNS package and IIS, even if you added it to that script and then you start the virtual machine, it doesn't mean it's actually running. Now, if you follow me, you know that at Mike Resseler, about in a week, it's now in creative hands. I will release a book, well, a book. It's only 65 pages, so it's not really a book, that goes into detail of all of these packages, what you need to do. But remember, if you deploy DNS, and that's probably the most important one, that you actually then have to go in through remote PowerShell, PowerShell Direct, whatever, and then enable the role. Will that change in the next versions? Probably, maybe, we don't know that yet, but as of today, you need to do this. IIS, exactly the same thing. For Hyper-V, will it support everything that we have on the full server today? No. Replica isn't supported yet. Remote effects isn't supported, and I actually think, because it's a headless server, remote effects will never be supported, because that means they can take out the graphical stuff out of the server to keep it small. And as I already said, clustering, no validation tests. Now let's jump back. Where are we? Here we go. And show you a few things. So if you want to use Dizzam, again, very simple. If you want to add an IS image, just create the directory. And those of you who know Dizzam, see that I call Dizzam, I mount it, and then the only two things I need to do is adding some packages. How do you do it? Actually, kind of the same way as you do it with the script. But don't forget that you need to add the cap, and very important, and I made those mistakes as well, if you do it through Dizzam, you also need to add the language package. So it kind of looks like you're adding two packages, but you've got the normal package and you need to add the language package as well. So take that into consideration. And then of course do a commit so that it works. Now, let's see if I can show you this. Actually, I've got 5 minutes. So for setup complete, everybody knows what setup complete is? You put it in a server, the first time it boots, it will execute everything inside that file, and then afterwards it's totally ignored. You can add things in there as well, and that will actually be executed. How do you do it? You go to that Nano server virtual machine, you mount the image with Dizzam, and then you need to go to Windows, Setup. There's a possibility the first time that you actually need to create them, because they won't be there. Setup and the scripts, and then you copy that CMD file right over there. How does a CMD file looks like? Extremely ugly, to be honest. Where do I have it? Here we go. This is it. PowerShell.exe -comment import module and so on and so on and so on. Luckily you only have to create this once, but keep that in mind. It's going to be a long line with a lot of dashes. But then you can use this, for example, to change the IP if you want to, or add some other things, all depending on your needs. And then finally, for the unattended, exactly the same thing. This is an example, but how are you going to put it into that server? You're going to go Dizzam again. You're going to go to CD Windows CD Panther, and then in there you add unattended XML and it will run also. So not really that difficult. Maybe the last thing I quickly want to show you is that DNS, at least if I find it, which I can't show you anymore since I already did it, but this is the way we're going to do it. We're entering through PS to PowerShell, type in the name and so on, and then we're going to enable that feature and, you know, import the module of DNS server. Again, this isn't done up front, so the moment you want to use DNS commands inside the machine, yes, you can do it remotely, but if you want to use it in the machine, you actually have to first time import it as well. So keep those things in mind, and then you're just going to quickly check whether the service is running or not, and that's about it. So you probably recognize this already from before. 2 minutes. We're importing the module. I always use verbose. Why do I do it? To see what is important. You don't have to, but you can see it's actually loading now all of the functions and the commandlets and so on, so I know what is happening. But again, that is up to you whether you use it or not. And then I should quickly just run get service DNS to make sure that it's actually running, and you can see now my service DNS is running. All right. 2 minutes left, so oops. Sorry. Good. Oh, I'm actually finished. I didn't know that. To conclude, Nano server, it is still in TP4. Should you use it in production? Please no, don't do it yet. However, start working with it today. It's going to be a very interesting option. We're seeing more and more packages, and my dream is, and I hope Microsoft will listen to my dream, I doubt it, but let's hope, is that you will be able to get your core infrastructure all on Nano server. I'm thinking Active Directory, I'm thinking DNS, DHCP, thinking HyperV hosts, clustering, scale-out file servers. All of your favorite core things could be running also, which means that you probably will be able to run a lot of them on a single host and save some money. Plus, nobody will care if you run a second one or a third one because it doesn't use that many resources. Why do we say start using it now? Because GA probably somewhere September, October. I always say when GA will be there. Well, when is Ignite? Probably somewhere around that timing. But that means you're prepared and you can start using it as well. And the last reason why I think you should start playing with now, if you got custom-made solutions like web portals and those kind of things, they will run on that type of server as well. But that means your developers have to start rethink how they're going to deploy it already today. And last but not least, if you want to have certain third-party vendors, their solutions running on it, you should start pushing them as well. And with that, are there any questions left? The problem is I'm not 100% sure. Please shout because I can't see half of you with the lights. No questions? All right. Again, last remark. If you want to learn more about it and you want to see a lot more demos and a lot more PowerShell nice stuff, Room 5, immediately after the session, 2 great speakers that will even go in depth, that will start playing with Azure and do some really, really funky stuff. And with that, enjoy the rest of the day. Hopefully I'll see you this afternoon in one of my other sessions. And thank you very much.